Today, we have an announcement to make, and Angie is going to tell us all about it.
Yes, and we're so excited to let you know that we're going to be adding books to our website, books from guests and books that we personally recommend to help you with your creative journey.
You know, besides all the interesting guests we've had that shared with us a lot of great content, several of them have actually written books that I think are going to educate and motivate. I know they have me.
Absolutely. So don't forget to check them out at thoughtrow.com, and it's going to be right there on the homepage, so you won't have to search.
Hi, everyone. Hope you've been having a wonderfully creative week. I'm Rod Jones, and we celebrate what people love to do creatively by giving them a voice so you can learn and be motivated from their life's experiences. And I almost ran out of breath on that one.
That happens sometimes. And I'm Angie Jones. Welcome to Thought Row Podcast. We invite you to subscribe wherever you listen, and we focus on sharing with everyone how they can think, be, and live more creatively.
Absolutely. And so how about telling us who our guest is today?
Well, our guest today is Denise Dorman, and she is a marketing, media relations, content design specialist in strategy, storytelling, and sticky marketing.
That's all she does?
That's all she does.
You know, I really like that term, sticky marketing.
Yeah, me too.
You know, everyone's going to benefit from what Denise has to say about marketing yourself or your company. Right. And it's my understanding that we're going to chat a lot about PR today, public relations.
Yes, we are.
Speaking of PR, do you have a quote that best describes PR?
Well, you know, this is such a cool quote. You guys are going to love it. It is really cute, but also so true. So here it is. If a young man tells his date how handsome, smart, and successful he is, that's advertising. If a young man tells his date she's intelligent, looks lovely, and is a great conversationalist, he's saying the right things to the right person, and that's marketing. If someone else tells the young woman how handsome, smart, and successful her date is, that's PR. And it's by S.H. Simmons, and I think it's such a great quote.
It's a great quote, and I wish I knew all that when I was younger.
Well, I think you naturally know that to an extent. I think we all do that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, you know, that quote has a ring of truth when you think about it, and I think we all self-PR ourselves every day.
Well, I think we do. We try to look at the positive things in our person in our lives, I guess.
Well, we should think positive about ourselves, right?
Well, you try to do that as much as possible because you need to feel good about yourself always as much as possible. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you know, let's go on and learn from an expert and hear what Denise Dorman has to say. And I want to make a little announcement here for everyone listening. If you grab a paper and pencil or something that you can jot down notes with, I think that's going to be really important for this episode. So
yeah, and also she provides a lot of links.
A lot of links, a lot of advice.
The nice thing about having this recording is you'll be able to run it back over and over so you can get those links because I wrote them down. They're really, really good links.
Me too. I took a ton of notes. So be sure and get your pencil and paper and listen to Denise Dorman.
Hi, Denise. Welcome to the Thought Row Podcast. You know, we're really excited to learn about PR, which is something that everybody wants to know more about.
Sure. Hi, Denise. It's great to have you with us today. And yes, we're going to be talking about everything you wanted to know about PR, but we're afraid to ask.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, Rod and Angie. I really appreciate it.
You got it. We're so glad you're here. But before we officially start the interview, we always ask our guests what they had for breakfast. So what did you have this morning, Denise?
Yogurt, vanilla yogurt.
That sounds good. Do you have toast with it or coffee?
Coffee. Yes, always coffee. That's the order of the day. Coffee first.
That sounds nice and simple. Juice. Nice and simple, no cooking. Love it.
You know, what's really interesting is every time we ask this question, everybody says if we don't ask it, they go, how come you didn't ask that guest that question? We wanted to know what they had for breakfast.
Yeah.
Like everybody gets ideas from it.
I think so.
Well, Denise, why don't you share with us where you grew up, where you're originally from, and where you grew up?
Oh, sure. I grew up in northern Illinois, which all of your listeners will probably know in my accent. I'm told I have one. So I grew up in farm country outside of Chicago, probably about 45 miles northwest of Chicago, in Hampshire, Illinois. And I attended Northern Illinois University. I received my journalism degree with an emphasis in public relations and a minor in sociology. And then from there, I went into television. I was the writer-producer for a nationally syndicated TV series called The Superchargers with Jan Gabriel. He was the star of the show and the executive producer, and we continued to partner together on projects for the remainder of his life. And from there, I went into advertising. I was the senior account executive and the head copywriter for an ad agency that had accounts like Harmony Toy Company, Siegfried and Roy, Lance Burton. I'm trying to think who else, Motorola, Sears, a lot of the names, back in the 90s, it would mean something, but today they probably don't.
Well, they still kind of do. I mean, those were
they still kind of do. I mean,
major brands.
Yeah, they were major logos for sure. And it was really an honor to work on those accounts. And I learned a lot. I did a lot of things in banking with Bank One and Grant Thornton Financial Services. So a lot of different accounts. And then from there, I left and I went into more of a public relations role. And then I also did a lot of video production for B2B companies. And then I also ended up becoming the outside agency of record for First Penn Pacific Life Insurance Company, which was owned by Lincoln Financial Group and eventually reabsorbed by Lincoln Financial Group, hence ending my my account agency of record account.
We're definitely going to talk to you about your PR experience, and you have a lot of experience.
Sure.
I want to go back to maybe some of the clients you had in the 90s.
Sure.
Who was your favorite and who was your least favorite?
Or can you say?
Or I could say. Okay. I could say, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, but what was really fun, we had Harmony Toy Company, which there was a gentleman named Marshall Brodeen who was I think the founder of that company, if I'm not mistaken. And he was famous. I'm never really quite clear on if this is a national thing or if this is just Chicago, but Bozo the Clown was the big deal here in Chicago.
Bozo.
Well,
oh my gosh.
That was definitely national.
Was he national?
Yeah, it was.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so WGN was the main station. It was filmed or shot here in Chicago. And Wizzo the Clown was one of the characters. He was kind of a magician, and that was Marshall Brodeen. And so then Marshall platformed that into selling magic trick kits to kids and games and that sort of thing. And then he got into games. And then because of the association with Marshall, we ended up with Siegfried and Roy and Lance Burton through the Mirage Corporation. So that was really fun working on those accounts. I really enjoyed that.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, just such a different clientele than the corporate clientele.
Yeah, and when you think of Siegfried and Roy, they went through quite a bit towards the change of their career.
Yeah, this was pre-Tiger Attack. Yeah. But Marshall was a character. We'd sit in meetings, and it was interesting to me because I've never been around people that worked specifically, with clowns. And so he would talk about, Cookie and I went to Bozo's funeral the other day, and he would talk about them as if they were still in character, which I thought was really interesting.
That is interesting.
I think that Marshall Brodeen, he was pretty famous. I mean, I've heard of him before.
Yeah.
He was a
very famous magician.
National. And then his stuff toys that he created for kids, right?
Right. A lot of boxed trick set games. And I think that must be, I don't know the whole origin of Harmony Toy Company or if they're even still around. I need to probably research that and see if they are. But he was part of that.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So from there, I went into more of a PR role. I got involved, and this was pre-Facebook, pre-release, a lot of social media. But
before you go into that too much, I want Angie's got a question for you that I think our listeners are going to want definition of.
Oh, sure.
Well, I know that you were going to talk about PR, But for those that don't know, why don't you give us a definition of the term or acronym PR?
Oh, sure. So PR stands for public relations. And I think about this differently than probably traditional marketers. Traditional marketers will tell you that marketing is the overarching thing, and then everything kind of falls underneath marketing. Whereas I look at it as promotion is the overarching idea. And underneath it are all of these different tactics, and public relations is one of them. And in my opinion, it's a must. If you're doing an integrated marketing campaign, it's a must-have component. And if you don't have money for advertising, then do public relations. And don't be intimidated by it, because public relations is not rocket science. It's tenacity is what it is.
Okay, that's
so
good
public
to know.
Relations. Yeah. So if you think about the difference between advertising and public relations, if you were looking at an online dating site, somebody might say, pick me, I'm the best boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever they are. Whereas public relations would be your friend saying to you, you really should date that guy or that girl or that person because they're really great. So it's like a third party endorsement, somebody else telling you how great something is versus somebody directly telling you how great they are.
So our listeners, they have you gave a really great definition. So why would someone really want to develop a PR strategy? Would that be the first course of creating notoriety? Yeah, to create notoriety, to, create attention for your brand or either your personal brand or what product that you're marketing, product or service that you're marketing. So public relations, the idea of this strategy behind public relations is you figure out who is your audience, who's your ideal customer, and then you figure out where did those people gravitate towards, what social media sites, what publications, what media outlets do they gravitate towards, who are they? And then once you refine that and you know who your ideal customer profile is, then you start to put together a plan of, okay, I'm going to hit up the editor of this magazine, or I'm going to start publicizing and hanging out more on LinkedIn because this is a B2B thing and everybody in B2B is hanging out on LinkedIn. And so I need to really put my time into LinkedIn. So those are the kinds of tactics that you use to draw attention to your service or your personal brand or your product.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So it's just really, like you said, being a little more tenacious. I think, I don't know, for me anyway, it's hard because you want to put yourself out there and promote yourself. And then all of a sudden you feel like, oh God, I just feel like I'm overdoing this. Is there such a thing as overdoing it?
No. And in fact, I will tell you, so there's two ways to look at PR. There's inbound, where you're actually getting feeds of different leads. For example, there's something called helpareporterout.com. There's a site called quoted.com. It's QWOTED. There's prhunter.com, pitchrate.com, sourcebottle.com. And all of these sites, you can sign up for a free account. It's wonderful because it's free. And then you will get leads sent to you every single day of journalists that are looking for specific specialists that they can quote in an article or interview. And so that's what I call kind of the low hanging fruit. So I'm always monitoring that to see, where I can plug myself in or plug my clients in. Right. And then, so in radio guest lists, there's a free version and there's a paid version. I have the paid version, which isn't much. It's like $9 a month, but that's also great because then you get a list of all the podcast queries and radio producer queries. They're looking for a guest for their show. And that's really a great investment. And then you can go on Twitter and you can look for the hashtag Journo requests. It's hashtag and then JOURNOREQUESTS. You look for that, and you also look for PR request, hashtag PR request, to see what journalists are looking for on Twitter. And so those are kind of all the inbound leads that you can get for PR that I call the low-hanging fruit. That you can pretty much get something. I mean, depending on your niche, it might be really specialized, but if I say you're just a general, small business, you could easily get quoted in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, pretty quickly, just Washington Post, just monitoring helpareporterout.com to see what's coming through.
Denise, what is the process, though, if a reporter says, oh, I'm interested in knowing more about what you have to say, or can you give me a few lines that I can put into an article? What's the process? Does the reporter reach out to you, or how does that work?
So with helpareporterout.com, you'll see all the different queries. And then when you respond to one, there's like a specific code that's unique to Help a Reporter Out that you respond to. And then in your subject line of your email, you'll put HARO, HARO, : and then you'll say, responding to, or I'm a specialist in whatever they're asking about. And then you just write to them and give them just your really quick it has to be a quick pitch. It can't be this whole page full of, paragraphs of text. It has to be a paragraph of, quick bullet points of how you can provide them with value in some way and answer their questions. And then they'll get back to you and they'll say, okay, is it okay if I call you to set up an interview? So they may interview over the phone, or they might just say, I'm really busy, can you just email me a few lines? So it can go either way.
So when you're making your pitch, is it best to just use bullet points?
It is.
So just get to the
because
point.
People are
elevator
glancers.
Pitch.
It really is.
Okay.
And then when they want to know more detail, they'll ask you for more detail. Because at this point, you're just kind of, you're just kind of piquing their interest. You're not giving them the full story.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
And I've heard this from others. Is there any pitfalls of exposing yourself through PR?
Everybody says there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I disagree with that.
No such thing.
Because I've seen bad publicity.
Ink.
Yeah, right. Bad ink.
There's a famous piano player that once said that, and it's stuck now for a century practically. So,
and it has transitioned over to bad publicity. I've heard it used that way too, but there is such a thing as bad publicity. Let's be honest. There's a lot of politicians out there that say things inelegantly. I've even done it, said things inelegantly, and then, you're that kind of trails behind you for the rest of your life. But then you do something good and that kind of displaces it. But yeah, there is such a thing as bad publicity, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Okay.
If you don't do something to override the bad publicity by doing something good or saying something good, it's just always going to be hanging around and always be in the Google search.
Well, that creates you're notorious, right? You have notoriety for being edgy or being a jerk or whatever, right?
Sure.
I know that you gave us a few examples of the best places to get PR results. Are there any others that maybe would be super easy for someone to approach? Like if there's a couple that, if you have a small business or you are...
If they want to do podcast interviews, and I highly, highly recommend podcast interviews, there's a website called, and I was trying to share this with you the other day and I couldn't think of it, but it's called matchmaker.fm. So you sign up for matchmaker.fm and you create a profile for yourself as a subject matter expert. And some people, I will admit, are reluctant to say, oh, I'm not really a subject matter expert. But you have to understand, in public relations, there are many degrees of subject matter experts. From the college professor that wrote a textbook on this topic to someone that's just an everyday person and experienced something. So don't ever be shy to put yourself out there as a subject matter expert, because on some level you are for something. Good. One time I was actually quoted as a subject matter expert on pop culture, which, hey, isn't everybody?
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. That is true. Don't shrink back and think, oh, I'm not an expert. Just, put yourself out there.
Right. Don't be shy about it. Have confidence and put yourself out there. And even if you have to kind of pretend you're another person for a moment just to do it, but put yourself out there.
I'm curious, why are quotes so important in PR? You see that people always try to push their quote.
Making a quote.
I do lots of quotes. When I write an article, I always put a quote at the end. And it seems like I get a lot of people are more interested in my quotes than what I have to write. But anyway, why are quotes so important, especially when you're putting out a press release?
Quotes are the sound bites. They're the essence of the story. So I think in one or two sentences, you get the full essence of the entire story. That's the idea. That's the idea behind sound bites when you're doing a podcast interview, is to have that quick 60-second almost elevator pitch.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. We often see people that are experts in the field have lots of opportunity to get PR exposure. And I think that for the average person trying to get PR, we just don't know how that works. Tell us how that works when they go to get PR.
So if you're doing it yourself, which I'm kind of slanting this conversation towards somebody that's doing it themselves.
Yes,
So I would recommend, that you sign up for all of these free sites where you're getting all of these queries. And then additionally, what you can do, you can either go to a site like Fiverr, Fiverr.com and purchase a media list, or you can do the homework yourself and research it. But you need to build yourself a media list of at least the top 10 media outlets that would be important to you to get the word out on your either personal brand, product, or service. So you identify who those are, and then you start emailing those editors and those producers. And typically, here's the thing. Unfortunately, all of these TV and radio producers and frankly, editors too, even magazine writers, they're getting literally 1,000 emails a day.
Right.
So you can't be shy about following up. And you don't have to say, I just wrote to you yesterday, and you don't even have to mention that you've ever emailed them before, but you have to keep following up and sending them the pitch until they finally respond back. And they may not even see your email for the first 15 times that you've sent it to them. So don't feel rejected. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed about following up. Just keep following up and be tenacious.
Oh, okay. So that's like a lot more times than I thought you would have to send something. Because like if I don't hear back from somebody, I'm like, okay, I don't want to bug them anymore.
I think that's what most people assume, and that's obviously incorrectly because they're really busy. They're like Denise said, they get 1,000 emails a day. How many are they going to actually look at?
That's true.
Or if they pass it on to an assistant, and then you're hoping the assistant will think. It's like people reading your book to see if it's going to get published or not. That first channel of the person that sits there and goes through it, they may hate it, but the publisher may love it.
That's true.
I think press releases, press goes that way too.
Yeah, it is subjective. It certainly is. But it was really interesting. I did a panel. When was this? Well, I should back up and say last fall, I did a national publicity summit with Steve Harrison's group. Every quarter or so, he puts together about 80 or 90 journalists or TV producers, radio producers, podcast producers, and magazine writers and newspaper. And he puts this together, and then now because of COVID, it used to be in person, but now you just literally sit in front of your camera and you pitch these people for, I think I did 6 sessions of 4 hours each or something like that, where you're just pitching all of your clients. And one of them actually came out and said, just so everybody understands, just keep following up because I'm literally getting 1,000 emails a day. That was one of the TV producers. So of course they would, but you just have to think like that. Don't feel embarrassed and don't feel rejected. Just be tenacious and keep following up. And then I did a panel in January with this South Jersey writers group. And on the panel was a journalist from, he used to work for a publishing company. Now he's a book publicist out of Israel. And then another gentleman who was a celebrity publicist out of Los Angeles. And so the three of us did this panel, and it was really interesting to me. The gentleman from Los Angeles that did a lot of the celebrity publicity was explaining that he literally will send the same email pitch every day, not even change a word, not change a word in the subject line, just send it. And he said, sometimes it takes 100 times before I get a response.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought that was really interesting.
I
had never done that.
That could get you hated. We've been around PR quite a bit, and then also publicists. Why don't you tell our listeners what the difference between somebody, if you hire a publicist as opposed to hiring a PR agent or vice versa?
Well, to me, a publicist is a PR agent, so I'm not really sure what quite clear on what the differentiation is there. I mean, unless you're seeing like an independent publicist versus a PR firm, that's really massive. An independent publicist.
We've seen where some talent say contact my publicist. And then sometimes talent says, you have to go through my PR agency. Is that the distinction, as you just said?
Yeah. So if you're going through their PR agency, there is going to be an assigned publicist within that PR agency that they're working with. They'll always have at least one that's specifically assigned to them, almost kind of like in an ad agency where you've got a specific account representative assigned to you. So there's like the big agencies, which are very expensive, and the minimum cost would be, and this is a minimum, would be $5,000 a month. And then there's the independent publicists that might charge you $3,000 a month because they don't have all of that overhead. But even as an independent publicist, you do have overhead. I mean, I pay for a media database that I pay $4,000 a year for, and then I pay for a lot of subscriptions to all of these other different things that, kind of add up. And so you definitely have to incorporate some of your costs into what you're charging your client. But yeah, I mean, when you're going with a major PR agency, then you're really looking at a lot of overhead and a lot of built-in costs, and it's expensive. That's why I say to people, if you can do it yourself, do it yourself. It's not rocket science, it's tenacity, and it's just understanding how to be appropriate. When you send out a press release, if you send out a release through like the wire service, and by that I mean like through PR Newswire or Business Wire or Market Watch, you don't follow up with people and say, hey, did you see my press release? I mean, you just kind of like need to learn these little nuances of how to follow up with people. So you don't badger them in that way, but you just follow up with them and say, hey, I read this article that you wrote about XYZ, and I know you're really busy, but I thought you might be interested to hear this added, piece of information about this topic. You do try to refine your pitch to match what the journalist is looking for. If you're pitching for yourself, you want to research that journalist, make sure they really write in the area that your business or service or personal brand, aligns with, and just research them and read their articles and get familiar with them and how they write, and make sure that you're on topic. That's the thing that irritates them the most, that you're not on topic.
You're such a pro at this. And before I ask you this next question, I wanted to ask you, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
You're an expert in PR and marketing. Is that a career that you would recommend other people pursue?
Oh, yeah. I love it. It's never boring. I get bored very easily, and this is a career that will never be boring. So I learn so much. I have so many different clients. I can't even believe some of the clients that I have. So it's never boring. It's always fast moving and interesting and educational, and you just meet interesting people, and I'm a creative and I love creative. So I'm kind of a weird hybrid because I'm just as much strategic as I am creative, and just as much salesy as I am introverted when I'm writing. So I'm kind of a weird hybrid in that way. But I think that the most fun people in the world are in the creative field. I really do.
Guess what? We agree with you.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah, I imagine you would.
What about social media? Is that a form of PR, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you need to monitor social media too. There's the other side to public relations is actually reputation management. So you need to create alerts for yourself. And by that, I mean, you go to like google.com/alerts, and then you, within quote, you do a quote mark, and then you put like your name and then end quote, so that's specifically, because if you put like, Rod Jones without quote marks around it, you're going to get every single media mention or, online mention on every single website that has the word Rod or the word Jones. So you have to put quote marks around it when you set up your alert. But you do Google alerts, there's socialmention.com, but I don't know if they have a free version. There's Awario, which is AWARIO.com. There's talkwalkeralerts.com. And these are just all different places where you can set up alerts and just kind of keep an eye on how you're being mentioned in the media.
That's good to know. I didn't know you had to put quotation marks, so thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
And I can assure you there are quite a few Rod Joneses out there. Some of them are famous writers and others are athletes.
That's true.
And you might even want to put like Rod Jones plus, Thought Row or something, or quote Thought Row.
I usually put Rod Jones artist writer. And that's what I generally do. But I didn't know about the quotes.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that helps. It helps refine the search or the listen, as they say.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, so I have a question about, let's say a major magazine wants to interview me about my art. How do I prepare for that media interview? What do I need to have?
You would need to have a high-res photo of yourself because they're going to want to have a photo of you in the article. And depending on which magazine it is and how this all plays out, I mean, they may come to your studio and do a photo shoot, which would be ideal. And you're going to want to have high-res images of your art to provide to them. And then just understand what is kind of definitely familiarize yourself with that publication. I mean, read articles that this journalist has written so you have a familiarity with how they write and what they write about and how they talk about things, just so that you can kind of align yourself and kind of mirror what they need.
Okay. That makes sense. Fit what culture they have in their magazine or publication to what you are presenting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that does make sense.
And what their tone is, how they write about it. Yeah, it's just really good to familiarize yourself with every journalist that you're working with.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I guess we should mention press releases, although we did discuss it a little bit earlier. We've used electronic press releases in the past, and they were somewhat effective. But then again, I don't think we're handling it as well as you just suggested.
No, not at all.
What are your ideas on getting lots of exposure with a press release?
Well, one of the things that people think is that there are a lot of free press release services out there. And a lot of people think, that really helps my SERP, which is search engine results page, what position you're in on if somebody Googles your name. And it really doesn't, not with the free services. Now, if you go with PR Web, for example, which is a division of Cision, which is PR Newswire.
That's what we use.
Yeah. That's a more cost-effective way to go about it. So that's I just did one last week. It's like $205. And it's worth it. It's worth it to do that. Then you're going to be on Yahoo News and all of these different places. But it's the thing with SEO with Google is like every single time that you get, say, a press release put out there, it's worded verbatim on every single place. And Google doesn't like anything to be the same. So it doesn't really help your SEO all that much to do a press release, unfortunately. But it does give you credibility. When somebody looks you up, they're going to see that you're, on Dallas Morning News and you're on Yahoo, News and you're on all of these different places. So it does give you a credibility with people that are researching you. So that's the real benefit of it, in my opinion. We see when we've done it in the past, we'll see all the different publications that have picked it up. Is it a good idea to reach out to those publications after the fact and say, hey, I noticed you picked up our press release. Would you like to interview us? Would you like to know more? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Some of them, though, it's funny because they have, like PR Newswire will have deals with all of these different publications, and some of them it's just an automatic that they pick it up. And so if you do follow up with them, make sure it's one that really makes sense based on the subject matter.
Right.
I'm trying to think of an example. There's been some times when I've done that and it's just gone into some weird places that don't have anything really to do with the topic of the press release. So you just be cognizant of that.
Just let it fit what your goals are, I guess. Yeah, totally.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it seems to me that initiating a PR program is pivotal in marketing yourself, as you were saying. How would you rate? I think so. Yeah, I think from what you're saying, it really is super important to put yourself out there and not shy away from, being a little bit more aggressive in pursuing PR. So how would you rate PR and the overall promotion of someone's content, like on their website? Do you feel like that's important?
I do. In fact, I'm redoing my website right now. So if anybody looks at it, it's a disaster. Hopefully by the time this comes out, it'll be better. But yeah, I'm actually reworking it right now. So that you need to either have a media link on your website or a newsroom link on your website. And within that, you need to have links to all of the different either PDFs to publications that have interviewed you or links to podcast, radio, or TV interviews. So that's really important to have on there because, again, it just establishes your credibility.
Yeah, very good. There are many directions we all can go when it comes to marketing ourselves, including PR, email marketing, affiliate marketing, blogging like we do occasionally, and podcasting, and getting yourself booked as a speaker. What is the best strategy to take when you're first starting out? Which one of those would be the best way to go?
When you're first starting out, I would definitely try to get mentioned in magazine and newspaper articles and get on podcasts, because it's kind of the snowball going down the hill. It's like you have to build the momentum to get the bigger things. And you want to definitely try to get publicity within your own market at first, even if it's a local magazine, a regional magazine, a local newspaper, local, cable, outlet or something like that. You want to try to get yourself out there within your own community. And then once you have those samples, then you can use those samples to show bigger markets. Bigger markets want to see that you can handle yourself. So that's what they're looking for, is how well you can handle yourself on television or radio. And then that just establishes your credibility and their confidence in your ability to handle yourself appropriately when they have you on, national television or national radio.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, though. I mean, you have to be able to perform if you're going to do an interview. You can't.
We have listeners and we've had guests that are both have businesses, B2B, B2C businesses. And a lot of our listeners are creative people, artists, writers, etc.
My favorite people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, what is your number one advice for creative people? Seem to have a harder time getting PR than, let's say, if you own a hamburger chain.
Mm-hmm. Well, creative people, in my estimation, because I am married to one, so I'm quite familiar with that group. A lot of creative people are very introverted. And although my husband will speak in front of 100 people at a lecture, and he has no problem with it, and he'll sign autographs all day at San Diego Comic-Con, but he's introverted. So it's not his nature to go out of his way to get marketing or go out of his way to get PR and reach out to media people. Media people reach out to him, and then he's very accommodating, but he's not proactive about it. And that's very common, that artists and writers are not that proactive with reaching out. And so in those cases, you need to, if you can afford it, you need to either, go on Fiverr and see if you can find somebody to help you, or you need to hire a publicist for at least $1,500 a month. And that would probably be the lowest that a publicist would charge, would be maybe $1,500 a month. And usually it can take like up to 6 months to really get momentum. So most publicists will not sign somebody for less than 6 months. I have done so on occasion because I've helped out people, but to my mind, it's almost a disservice because it takes so long to get the momentum going.
There's so much competition.
Yeah. Oh, there is.
There's so much competition in the art world. So if someone does retain a publicist or PR agency, is that going to help them sell more work? I mean, I guess it just helps with their brand, right?
Mm-hmm. I think once you have a stronger brand and you become more familiar to people, then it's easier to sell your works. I do.
Well, that does make sense. I mean, if people don't know about you, they cannot buy your work, So
as we always say, people can't buy what they don't know exists, right?
Exactly.
And if you're doing art shows, make sure that you're putting it out there, what your appearance schedule is, so people know where they can find you. So once people start to know you and like you, they need to know where they can find you. And so if you're not using a publicist, at least have that on your website, what your appearance schedule is.
Well, you see a lot of people do that, like on Instagram. They'll say, I have a show coming up here or there, whatever. But Instagram covers an international audience, and that doesn't necessarily mean people that could drive there or walk there are going to show up. It's kind of tough in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of, and I should probably, let me think if I've got a list handy. There's a lot of local stuff you can do. I mean, I think locals, is there neighborhood? nextdoor.com. There's Alignable. I think it's locals.com. There's like a lot of different things that you could do regionally that would be a good way to promote an event if you're going to be in a certain city at a certain time.
That's
a lot
really
of free
great
online
idea.
calendars. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like with your local newspapers and stuff, you can get into their online calendar.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that, but that's a good one. Especially, if you're in a local market or regional market. So
but thank God for social media. That makes it just so much easier.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, social media is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you do for your clients, Denise?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah. And it is a lot of work. It is. There are automated services you can use like Hootsuite or Buffer or CoSchedule that you can just, sit there on a Sunday and preload everything so that and schedule it so it goes out on a certain day. And so that definitely cuts down on people's workload with social media. I tend to be more organic about it because I don't do it for that many people. So I just kind of do it as I'm thinking about it. And I don't know, I'm just more organic about it.
Well, and you're making graphics too. I mean, when we make posts, it either has a graphic or a piece of art or something about a guest that we had on our podcast. Mm-hmm. And you're making graphics, right?
I make graphics, infographics. I am the Canva queen. I make videos all day in
favorite.
Canva.
I love Canva. Oh, I think it's great.
It's the best thing ever. I should be their publicist because
all
I do is talk about Canva.
Well, hey, if it works and it allows you to do what you want to do and, get it out there quickly, why not?
I like Adobe Sparks.
I know.
Right? I know. Yeah. You're into the Adobe, which it's like, I don't know. I like Canva.
Fast for me. Canva is I mean, you can do anything in Canva, really. Mm-hmm. I guess we're going to have to hashtag them on this episode.
If Canva would like to sponsor our show, we would be wholeheartedly on for that.
And make Denise their spokesperson.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yes, I would love to be their spokesperson because I'm just the biggest fan and biggest enthusiast. I think they're amazing. It gives you so much creative freedom.
Well, are you going to ask your famous question?
Well, yeah, I think we're getting to the point in our show where I'm going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests. And yes. And that is, if you could sit on a park bench and chat with anyone from the past, who would it be?
My biological mother.
Oh, okay.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Did she pass away or?
She did. She passed away, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was 2016, but I have to double check on that. I was adopted at birth, but my mom and dad were married when they gave birth to me. And so I had 3 siblings that were older than me that were my full biological siblings. And weirdly, they actually grew up about 8 miles down the same street that I lived on. Oh. And we had no idea about each other. And then, but I always knew I was adopted. So I was always looking. And so Jan Gabriel, who is my, business partner and the star of the Superchargers, he was really invested in this whole situation. And so he insisted that I reach out to them because I had a name. And so I just sent a letter to the person that I thought would maybe be my dad. And it turned out that he was, and he lived about a half an hour away from me. And so we all reconnected and I met them all in person. And so, about, I want to say 6 years ago or so, my mom passed away. She lived in New Mexico. So I went out to see her before she passed away. But there's so much that I don't know that would be so nice to sit on the park bench and just, pummel her with questions.
Understandably, though. I mean, that way you could get some history and her thoughts and what she was more like because, you didn't get to be around her.
And see much. If you have some of the same
ideas and traits and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, we all pick up things from our parents.
Yeah, the artistic gene definitely comes from her. I used to do a lot of art in high school and probably should have gone into art, but I liked writing equally. And then when I met her, I found out she was an artist and her sister was and her brother, I guess, was a muralist in Los Angeles. And then her sister was a journalist in Indiana. So, the genes run strong.
I guess so.
Yeah, apparently.
You really did follow in their footsteps.
It's interesting how many people, when Angie asks this question, they generally do refer to a parent or a grandparent. Mm-hmm. Grandparents are very popular.
Yeah. Some kind of relative.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, thank you for sharing that with us today.
Sure.
Well, Denise, both Angie and I knew you were going to be a really great and informative guest, especially when it comes to PR and all the interesting things that you said.
So much information. Thank you.
So much so, I think we really need to have you on our podcast again.
Oh, I would be honored. Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
Yes, I know our listeners are really going to benefit from your expertise, Denise. So thank you again. And
I mean, if you ever wanted me to come on and talk about specifically art websites and art journalists and
yes,
like specifically slanted to either writers or artists, I'd be happy to do that. That would be a different kind of a conversation.
Well, that will be our next show. How's that?
Yeah,
I love it.
Sure.
PR was a good one to start with.
Yeah, it was a starting point, but I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of information to impart about book marketing and art marketing that I would welcome the opportunity. So thank you.
Book marketing would be very popular because we have a lot of writers that...
that would love to know how to do that.
Novelists,
it's quite the adventure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I need to let everyone know if you'd like to know more about Denise Dorman. We will have links for her under the show guest tab on thoughtrowpodcast.com so everyone can learn more about her, and please connect with her on social media and check out her website when it's all updated.
Yeah, please do. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Also, if you're enjoying our podcast, both Rod and I would really appreciate you buying us a cup of coffee. Just go to thoughtrow.com, scroll down a bit, and you can find that link right on our website on the homepage.
It's really easy to do, by the way.
Yes, it is.
And all the money we receive goes to our production costs.
Yep.
And primarily because we want to keep our show commercial free, and we want to continue to bring you the best quality content with great guests.
That's right. Thank you for listening to Thought Row Podcast.
I'm really glad you tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed the thoughts and ideas we shared with you.
We post a new podcast every week, so remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. So it's bye for now from my husband Rod and I, wishing everyone